So we'd like to thank everyone for your time this afternoon coming out to this important public informational meeting, which is related to the Bear Creek Watershed project. This project is being led by NRCS and Soil and Water Conservation Service, with Madison County serving as the local sponsor for this important project. My name is Darian Warren, and I serve as the Senior Project Manager for Wagner Engineering, which we are serving as the engineers for this particular project in coordination with the entities that I just mentioned, along with our partner, AJA Management. So at this time, I would like to bring up the board president for the Madison County Board of Supervisors, who is the local sponsor, Mr. Gerald Steen.
Thank you, Darian. Appreciate it. Again, appreciate each one of you coming out on an evening like this. It's very fitting because we talk about watershed, talk about water. So it's very fitting. Before I go any further, I want to introduce or thank my colleagues here, Mr. Carl Banks, which you'll hear from him for District 4. He's one that's actually heading this project up for the board. And also District 5 Supervisor Paul Griffin. Appreciate y'all being here as well. I'll say very little with this because there's a lot of information, and we want to get to the Q&A as quickly as possible as well. But this watershed is something that's very concerning with the Board of Supervisors throughout the county. This is not just a Canton issue or one other issue in another area. This is a county issue. And so that's the reason the board took it on as a project, as a county project. And so today you will see and hear where the water is, where it's going, and hopefully how we can help resolve some of these issues as well. But again, I'm Gerald Steen, board president of the Board of Supervisors, and the board is in totally support of this watershed to help get it resolved where many of the people have been flooded in the past years, that hopefully we can help them get some issues resolved by directing the watershed or flow of water in another area to keep it from flooding homes and properties. So at this time, Mr. Banks, I would like to turn it over to you, and you can moderate and say what you like.
Thank you very much, Gerald. You know, I want to first thank the Board of Supervisors, because when I first got back on the board, y'all know I took a leave of absence for a few days. But anyway, when I first got back on the board, I wanted to find out why we were having so much flooding in Canton. And I asked our engineers to talk to our board, and the engineers said we need to do a watershed study. Now, the watershed study has to do with all the water trying to come through Canton from Gluckstadt and other development areas that are developing very fast, and because of that fast development, those streets, they drain water, they don't soak in water. Those rooftops drain water, don't soak in water. So Canton is seeing a lot more water coming toward it, trying to get to the Big Black River. We have maps and other posters up here that will be showing you where the water's coming from, where it's trying to go, and why, what we think we might be able to do to slow it down. We're not going to be able to eliminate the water, and we can't eliminate floods until we slow the water down trying to get through Canton. We want to slow it down. At the same time, we're working on some of the internal ditch work in Canton. We get ready to do some work on that Bachelor Creek creosote ditch, or something let's call it. We're getting ready to do some work on it. So that is separate from the watershed project. The watershed project is encompassing all of this large area around Canton. Water's trying to get to Canton from here, here, and a lot through here. We want to see what we can do to slow the water down. The engineers
can tell us what it's gonna take. We were lucky enough to, when we did the study, we were able to get that study. We spent $500,000 on the study. But we took that study, our attorney, Mr. Mike Espy, had a meeting with the head of the NRCS in Washington, where they had the meeting in Jackson, but he was able to hand him that study. And because of that, they funded initially with $25 million roughly, so that we can try to implement some changes in what we're doing and slow the water up. Now that's all I can tell you, because that's what I know. The engineers know all the answers. I'm just listening to them and trying to see if we can follow what they do. And they say we need to build a dam somewhere, we're gonna build that dam. They say we need a reservoir, we're gonna build that reservoir. Now, there's some people in here, some of our people, they're having flooding issues that we need to work with the city of Canton as a board. We work with the board members here in Canton to work on the infrastructure inside Canton. I know a minister sitting in here who has a building on Peach Street, and every time I pass it, I see sandbags. And that is something that's going on internally that needs to be corrected. Because when it rains on Canton, and it's not creating a lot of water out here, Canton still needs to be able to drain what rains on top of Canton, as well as when we try to slow it down from coming into Canton. Now, that's about all I can tell you. I'm gonna turn it back over to the engineers, and we're gonna start letting them tell you some things, and then you can have some questions you can ask them. So I appreciate all of y'all showing up, and hopefully some more of your neighbors will come. But those that don't, you're here and you're gonna tell them, okay? Thank y'all.
Thank you, Supervisor Banks. So at this time, before we go any further, I'd like to recognize some other elected officials that we have in the audience here with us from the city of Canton. And so we have Alderman Lafayette Wells, who's here with us today. We are thankful for their attendance also. We also have Alderman Tim Taylor and also Alderwoman Monica Gilkey. So we're thankful for them and their presence as well. And we also have representatives from NRCS and Soil and Water here with us also, Ogie Lewis and Nick Ivy. Yes, so at this time, like I said, we want to continue the agenda as we have it printed. So as Supervisor Banks mentioned, we would like to just brief the audience on this project, just give a little bit more detail in terms of the purpose, the goals and objectives, and what are the things we are looking to accomplish and how we plan to get there. So at this time, we're going to ask Mr. Dr. Bill McDonald from Wagner Engineering, who's going to come up and give a brief presentation at this time.
We have all of the city manager.
I'm sorry.
All tanks.
All tanks of equipment. City of Madison. Okay. Okay, in the back. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your presence as well.
Appreciate it, Darren. As Darren said, my name is Bill McDonald. I'm with Wagner, and we are working with the Board of Supervisors and very closely with the Mississippi Soil and Water Conservation Commission and NRCS on this watershed plan and environmental assessment. So the purpose of our meeting here tonight, what we want to do is talk generally about a couple of things. Number one, we want to just let you know what's happening now and what will happen. But just as important to that, we want to ask you to help us. We want information from you, and we'll tell you in just a few minutes specifically about how to do that. What we're talking about, particularly in this watershed plan environmental assessment, is we're identifying what's the current situation, what are the problems that we need to address, and then what are potential solutions. And it's really about that simple. What are the issues and how can we address them and resolve them? So as always, there is technical difficulties, but we'll get around those. There we go. Others have introduced the key stakeholders here, of course, the funding agency, the NRCS, the cooperating agency, Soil and Water Conservation Commission, who's actually executing the work on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. And then, of course, and we've mentioned the communities, but the communities are very important as well. And they have been very cooperative in helping us understand what particular issues they're having. So what are the goals of this plan and assessment? It's really quite simple. To reduce the impacts due to flooding. If we can reduce the frequency or the occurrence as well as the magnitude of flooding events and then the associated losses or impacts that occur with those events, that's the goal of the project. And then secondarily, but just as important, we want to improve the water quality. Actually, not just deal with quantity, but actually improve the quality of the water that flows through the Bear Creek watershed and eventually ends up in the Big Black. So what is a watershed? You hear that term a lot, watershed. You may hear the term drainage basin, drainage area. Essentially what we're talking about is an area of land that captures the rainfall and then directs that rainfall through the shed into a common exit point. A couple of characteristics just to think, you'll see several maps similar to this in the next few minutes. So just some things to keep in mind. This is the Bear Creek watershed, and you'll notice the flow, it runs up the page. Typically you think downstream, top to bottom. Well, just sort of orient yourself. It runs from the south here in the upper part of the watershed. This is the higher ground, the upper part of the basin, and it flows generally to the north and then to the northwest to that point where it all collects and empties into the Big Black River. So just think of it this way, that every drop of rain or every drop of water that flows through that watershed eventually ends up there in the Big Black. So all of those streams that you see are connected ultimately at some point or another, and they all contribute. So the flow, we'll see other depictions. For instance, this is the Bear Creek watershed. Notice, there's Madison County, and you'll notice it sits right in the middle of the county, right in the middle of Madison County. So, for instance, just a point of reference, this is 463 sort of runs along the upper ridge. That's the Reunion area. That's the Luckstadt right there. And then here's Canton. And so you notice that the water begins in the upper part of the watershed, and it flows and it begins to collect. And the farther downstream it goes, the wider that flow path gets. You see the more water collects, the wider the flow path. And there's some other characteristics that we'll point out, just different ways to look at that watershed. The Bear Creek watershed is actually made up of 4 sub-watersheds. And we divide it, and these are all determined by the resource agencies. USGS, for instance, has a big part in identifying and delineating the watershed. But for instance, we look at these smaller watersheds because they're each unique. They each have different development densities, for instance, or different types of land cover, different land uses. One may be more agricultural than another. Most of the higher density urban development is in the Little Bear. Of course, there's Canton right there. And then Gluckstadt coming, Madison here in this area. And so we look at these sub-watersheds so that we can treat, because causes and impacts here in the Tilda Bode may be different than in Upper Bear Creek. So we have to treat those differently. This is just another way to look at it. This is actually a graphic created by a computer simulation. We basically took the Bear Creek watershed, and if you can imagine dropping a rainfall consistently across the entire watershed at the same time, and just letting that rain fall until all the streams and the creeks fill and begin to flow. This is what that would look like. There's a couple of things to point out about this. Again, the water is moving from south northward in this direction. So you notice as flow moves downstream, the flow course widens. There's more water coming in every mile you go. But there's something really interesting that takes place, and you have to look. But the more you look at it, the more you see. If you can picture Canton about right there, and right in there is about, just purely as a point of reference, that's about where Canton Parkway crosses. Look what happens right there. There are look at these several streams all converge right there at that point into the main Bear Creek channel, and then it takes a 90-degree turn to the north and the west. When you begin to notice things like that, then the light begins to come on, and you start seeing the challenges that we're facing when you want to come up with ways to reduce that flow. Supervisor Banks did a wonderful job of explaining the connectivity through the watershed and how all this is impacted. So remember the primary goal, and that's to reduce the level and the duration of flooding. Well, before you can reduce the flooding, you got to figure out what's causing it, right? So looking at root causes. And there are basically two categories of causes. There are natural causes and human causes. We can't do a thing about the natural causes. We cannot do a thing about the intensity and the frequency of storm events. We're given the topography that we have, and by topography I mean the ground cover, the slope, the width, or whether the floodplain itself is wide or narrow, whether the slope is flat or steep, whether it's timber, grass, whatever the ground cover, the ability of the soil to absorb the rain. Those are all natural phenomena that we really can't impact. But when we begin to make decisions as humans, that's when we can have impacts. And two of the big impacts that we can have is altering the floodplain. We can't do anything about the topography that we're given, but we can change it, and we often do that. And we can take that floodplain and we can encroach on it. So I'll explain what we're talking about. But just very quickly, what do we mean by the frequency and the duration and the occurrence of flooding? This is an interesting statistic. This is not directly in the Bear Creek shed itself, but in the receding stream, the Big Black. This is just a matter of historical record. If you take the 20 peak crests of the Big Black River that have occurred since 1940, they have occurred since 1949. 5 of those crests have occurred in the last 4 years. What does that mean? I don't know. It means you can interpret however you want, but it's a fact. We're seeing more and greater frequency of storm events. We can't control that, but we can control the way that we respond to it. And that's where the solutions ultimately lie. So human causes, this is a neat little cartoon on the top. This is the way floodplains kind of evolve and manage themselves. You know, you got a river that is twisty and curvy. The rain flows, fills up, it deposits soil, and then over time it kind of changes its course, and you get a little oxbows and things like that. Well, the way that humans typically manage floodplains, that's on the bottom. We like to come in here and straighten them and widen them and deepen them. And then what happens once we do that? Then we build right up to the edge. And then when that rain falls, look what happens. And that's a very simplistic depiction, but it tells a story. And so this is where we can have the greatest impact. As an example of that, this is a picture. This is over the 20-year period you see from 2001 to 19. This just kind of look at these hot spots. You know, the yellow, orange, the pink along this spectrum. Those are areas of impervious. That's like rooftops, concrete, pavement, parking lots, streets, Those are areas where the water cannot infiltrate into the ground. And so notice how that type of surface has increased over the last 20 years. That's about just in that lower, or the Little Bear Creek watershed, that's about a 60% increase in the last 20 years of impervious ground surface. So that water's got to go somewhere, right? Another way to think of it, again, here's Bear Creek watershed. These blue areas, those are what we call the regulatory floodplain, or some people call the 100-year floodplain, or the flood zone. It's the mapped area that FEMA uses to regulate insurance rate, flood insurance rates. So we call it the regulatory flood zone. FEMA estimates that in the Bear Creek watershed that there are approximately 1,400 buildings that are located in that regulatory flood zone. Something to think about. So that's what we mean when we say we can alter the floodplain, or we can encroach into the floodplain. Those are human decisions. So that's where we have to start in terms of solutions. So how do we solve these issues? Well, there are three broad categories. And Supervisor Banks nailed it on the head. Right? He said you can reduce you can hold the water back. Right? If we can hold it back or reduce the flow, and then release it maybe at a later date on a sunny day or something. That's what we call detaining or retaining. So potentially you can have structural solutions like detention ponds, retention ponds, to store and hold back the water. There are, if you can't hold it back or reduce it, then you can remove it, and that's a matter of getting it out faster, moving it quicker. And that's a lot of times, unfortunately, that's where we go. We go straight to that. Let's just make the channel bigger, make it straighter and wider and deeper, carry more water faster. But that's got its own issues. But then, so if you can't reduce the flow or remove it faster, then you can get rid of the risk. And that's where you start removing risks from the floodplain. And those are solutions like property buyouts, property relocations. Those are policy decisions when you begin to enact ordinances and policies that help you manage those risks more effectively. So these are just examples of those. What we're starting, and we're sort of into that process now. But the first thing we do is what we call the no action alternative, and that's exactly what it sounds like. If we did nothing, if we took no action, what would happen? And that's, of course, nobody wants that alternative, but that's just a way to measure the impact that we can then use to measure how effective these alternatives are. So this is sort of our baseline or our benchmark. And then we start looking at non-structural alternatives. These are things that you can do that don't necessarily mean building something. You go up in the watershed maybe, and you implement what we call best management practices. These may be agricultural, these may be otherwise, different kinds of land uses. But it has to do with the kinds of crops you grow, or the kind of vegetation that you encourage. It has to do with promoting infiltration, reducing erosion, maintaining buffer zones around your streams and creeks so that you prevent or you discourage development right up to the edge. So you maintain buffer areas that encourage seepage and infiltration and collecting the water and slowing it down. And then there's structural, of course, we always think of the structural solutions. Let's go build a dam or a reservoir or retention pond, something like that. In all honesty, more than likely, the selected alternative that ends up out of this environmental assessment will be a combination of several of these different kinds of, some structural, perhaps some non-structural, some policy-oriented. It's really going to take all of these types of solutions working together. So what's the next steps? What's the timeline? We're in the planning in the EA phase, the environmental assessment phase. And again, that's where we identify current conditions, and that's what we're doing right now, identifying the problems and beginning to identify potential solutions. And then we'll take those solutions and we'll compare them and evaluate them against how against one another and how effective they are in achieving the purpose of the project. And then once that solution is selected, you'll have other opportunities as we go every couple months. We'll have other meetings, we'll invite comment, we'll present some possible solutions and invite you to comment on those solutions. And then that process will result in an ultimate selected alternative that will then be approved as it goes through the environmental assessment process. And then that approved alternative will be designed and then constructed. What can you do? And this is really very important. We really can benefit from, and this process will benefit from any information you can give us about historical flooding. If you have experienced flooding events, if you're willing to share that information with us, the date of the event, the location, the type of event or property loss, if you had high water, and this is really helpful, believe it or not, if you can give us photographs of high water mark, water standing on a structure or a telephone pole or whatever, we can take that and correlate that to real storm events and then use that in our evaluation process. But that kind of information is very helpful. And how do you give that to us? Well, you can email it to us. You can put a stamp on it and put it in the mail. You can go to the website, and there's some handout material around, I think, that's got the QR code on there. If you can use that QR code, scan that, and go to the website, there are ways that you can provide input. And also that website gives you the opportunity continuously, not just tonight or for the next few days, but anytime you can provide us comments or feedback, and we invite that. And then also we got some individuals. Holly is over here to your right, to my left. She and others can take information. If you want to talk to her and actually provide some information while you're here, she can take some information and correlate that to a spot on the map. So there are lots of ways that you can provide your input, and we invite you to do that. And with that, we've reached really what in some ways is a more important part of the meeting, and that's the question and answer. If you have questions, we want to be able to answer your questions. If you have comments to make, or again, information to provide, we want to receive that. So I'll turn it back over to Supervisor Banks to moderate that part of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Now, like I said, we're open now for questions, and somebody here is going to have answers other than me. But where's Ralph? Hiding over there. He was the first person to say something to me about flooding, but and I know what his issue is, but you want to mention that while we got all these aldermen in here?
Yeah, I think good evening. Leroy Lacey is down at Lacey's Insurance Agent, 421 West P Street. I know this probably is an internal problem that may not do anything for this county thing, but 421 West P Street floods in 30 minutes of a hard rain for the last 30 years. Mayors won't do anything. Aldermen won't do anything. They said it's a MDOT thing. MDOT says it's city's thing. And I don't know whose thing it is, but I know my building is flooded for 28 years. And I don't know whether this thing is going to address that, but I don't have, if you will, a flooding problem. I have a drainage problem. That's water won't go out and go where it needs to go fast enough, because I'm sure when this city was built, it wasn't built in mind with all of the water that's going to come from those banks up there all the way down. And I'm the lowest point of P Street, and that's the problem. And they did the train station. They closed up, it was about 15 drains there, they closed them all up, so the water don't have 3 drains to go out, and they right in my building. And all of the water comes from uptown, from old islands, from Renaissance Bank, all the way down to me. Then it comes back from the co-op on Fulton Street and Cameron Street. All the water comes to one central point.
With the Board of Alderman, we're gonna work on those problems too. The Watershed project is being designed to slow the water coming into Canton. As I said when I first started, we're gonna have issues with our citizens of Canton that are having some drainage issues of water that's falling straight out of the sky on top of Canton. So in those things, we're gonna be talking and meeting, and we've already started, like I said, on Bachelor Creek or the Creosote Ditch, and we're gonna work on some other areas of drainage, and I noticed yours, and that's why I pointed you out. You came to me and mentioned it, so I wanted to point that out first. Do we have anybody else that have any interest in or questions? Yes?
Mr. Payne. I've been working with Bill back when I didn't have any gray hair many, many years ago. But one of the things from the watershed standpoint that, Bill, you may remember, I remember from probably close to 15, maybe 20 years ago, as the area along Old Soldier Colony over here, just east of the interstate, was developed. Developer worked possibly with the city, the county, and if I remember correctly, developed what was then a high flow channel to be able to take some of his property out of the floodplain, removing material from the floodplain, building an area, and leaving a high flow channel to make sure there was no negative flooding impacts. The issue, if you go out there now, is you can't tell there was ever a high flow channel constructed because nobody took over the maintenance of the high flow channel to make sure it stayed free of a forest. Had it been mowed and maintained, or had wetlands versus popcorn trees, as I call them, that are now 30 years old, the capacity or the function of that high flow channel would not have solved any of this, but it certainly would have left some benefit from the first 2 years it was in service. So part of this, and getting to this gentleman's comment, is you can build everything you want. If it's a public facility and it's not maintained, 10 years later, you're gonna be right back in this room with the same exact problem. So his issue is maintenance and improvement. So I just point that out from the fact that somebody made, quote unquote, a flood improvement or made sure there was no flood impairment, but then it was never maintained, whether that was supposed to be on the developer and or the city. I have no idea where those agreed. I just know it was built, because it was built right behind where the Waffle House is. They went down, stayed right outside of the channel, excavated, maybe 100 foot wide, and widened the entire area. And all that capacity is pretty much gone because it's grown and silted up. So any improvements you make, again, gets back to maintenance. So anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's something that we recognize, and we have already started working on some type of commission or authority that will be responsible for the maintenance of whatever facilities we build. And that, I don't know what how we're going to fund that. That's all part of the planning right now to figure out how do we fund ongoing maintenance, similar to what was that, the Ross Connect, was that Pearl River Valley Authority. We're going to need something like that. So that's one of the biggest issues that we do understand is ongoing maintenance. I remember when they put the riffraff in the Creosote Ditch, and it stopped flooding for a while, but hadn't been maintained. And that's where we are now. We're going back in and try to fix some things that haven't been maintained. So maintenance is going to be very critical. And we do understand. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yes, Paul.
I'm looking at the map, but I couldn't really tell. Maybe the engineer can. Maybe the engineer can tell me. It's Harvey Crossing subdivision. It's at Yandell Road and North Old Canton in the Deerfield area. They have serious flood problem that they water is trying to make it to Canton and can't get to Canton. So it's sitting on them. Is this gonna help them?
I got a little picture.
When Supervisor Banks earlier said that this is about the whole watershed, I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think he had in mind. This is, yes, everybody thinks about Canton because that's where the water seems to collect and where the most, the catastrophic problems seem to manifest themselves. But yeah, this is about the whole watershed. So we'll be looking at impacts throughout the watershed in the upper regions where you're talking about, as well as in the lower areas. So yes, anything and everything like that is open for evaluation. We want to know about those kind of things so we can evaluate the causes of them and then potential solutions. Yes.
What you have in mind, just one quick question. Could you go back to where the watershed picture is? Because that may be a little helpful. Yeah, where the watershed picture.
It ain't no roads or streets on there.
I think you have another one. Well, maybe it's that one. Go back one. Okay. This is a county-wide, and you talked a lot about Canton in this area. What about from Madison south? Where could you have a picture on that show where the water goes?
Well, that's an interesting point. Well, if you don't mind me standing here and pointing, I'll just point and won't use this red dot. So, I commented earlier, the more you look at this, the more you begin to see. Until I really got involved in studying this watershed, I did not realize how the water behaved in this thing. And really, if you look at the ridge, the upper ridge of the watershed, that's 463 there. All right, so if you kind of orient yourself, everything from here north flows to the Big Black, but the majority of the city flows southward into the Pearl watershed. That's either going to be the Brashear or the Pearl or further to the west, the Hanging Moss. They're watersheds, fingers kind of that reach into Madison County, but they flow ultimately into Hines and then turn into the Pearl. So everything within that dividing line north is included in the Big Black and will be part of this watershed evaluation. But we just have to keep in mind where that line is and what parts of Madison flow in which direction.
Right, and that's what I wanted to hear you point out, because the monies that we've received at this point is really taking care of Bear Creek in this watershed. I'm gonna say from Madison originally south, we're looking at another pot of money we're working with the Corps of Engineers to try to find another pot of money to take care of the flooding in the middle of Madison south originally and on through. So it's really several different areas, but it's very specifically two different watershed type issues.
That's right.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. Anybody else? I saw somebody put a hand. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. My name is Charlie Whitehead. I know I heard Carl say something about the Crisp dip. And that water, I remember 1979. That Easter flood of 1979. Down on Martin Luther King Drive at that time, we didn't flood. We didn't flood, and the water was up on the Coliseum.
Down south of Canton, down on Campbell Street.
Yeah, it flooded.
Down on Digging, all them areas there. And then, because I was living out at that time also, all that was on the water for help. And you one every flooded back there at that time, but.
But my question is about the Crisso ditch. What can be done? You said you probably can slow the water down. I don't know, but the maintenance, it needs maintenance, to me. That's just me. How trees done grown up in.
I think that's what we're getting ready to do.
Yes, sir.
Do some corrections on, we're getting ready to do some clearing. Which is separate from the watershed project altogether. But we did receive some funds from NRCS. And we're matching along with the city of Canton. I see Fred Esco is also here, but I know we mentioned all the rest of the aldermen. But for all the city of Canton, Madison County Board of Supervisors are partnering to do some work, to do some corrections in the Creosote ditch. And we had 3 sites that they funded, but there were 5 sites that we looked at as being an issue. And we're going to do some correction at all 5 sites. But at the same time, I believe that there are some other things we can do in terms of the drainage. One of our problems, and the watershed is looking at that, one of the problems is getting the water out of Canton. On this side, I know we felt that we needed to get on the west of King Ranch Road up at that creek.
That's right.
And clear that out.
We need a big collector.
Because some of that water, it can't make it to the Big Blacks, backing up.
Right.
It's causing water to back up into Martin Luther King.
Right.
We didn't have it in '79. I agree, I was here in '79, so I do remember that. But no, we didn't have that. But those are some of the things that we as the local county and city, we're going to work on some of those things ourselves. And that's what we all here showing you all that we plan on doing that. We're not like our friends to the south. I think we kind of cooperate with each other. So we're going to do that. Anybody else?
Yes, and to put that time up there, time date.
The timeline, put that back up again. As you see, this watershed project is not, we're gonna fix it tomorrow project. It's gonna take some time. And I don't know if y'all paid attention to the timeline, but you notice just planning is 12, 15 months. Design is 12 months. Now that's some overlapping going on with that too. And then construction, 24 to 36 months, that's 3 years. Now there's been some overlapping, but we don't anticipate that we will be at the end of construction in 3 years. It's gonna take some time to put together what we want to put together to slow the water down. During that same time, we as a board, our alderman friends and the mayor, they're gonna be working on trying to see if we can get drainage proper in Canton. We get the drainage right, slow the water down coming in, we should reduce flooding. But the main thing is we just gotta stay on it. It's our biggest problem, and we gotta stay on it. It's not a problem that we ought to be meeting with you today, and then we all go home and everybody forget about it. We gotta stay on it, and then we gotta stay on, as the gentleman said in the back, we gotta stay on whatever we do, we gotta maintain it. We gotta keep the grass cut. We gotta keep the trees out of the ditch. And then, of course, you all can help by making sure that the wash machines that don't work no more don't get kicked off in the ditch. But we get mattresses and we gotta get tires, we gotta get all kinds of stuff out there. And it's not y'all that's doing it, but at the same time, you might see a neighbor, you see somebody, see something, say something, we always say so. We just need help. We want to help, but we need help.
But the Bachelor Creek project
Yeah.
starts in a couple of months.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing that in a couple months. That's gonna be done this summer. What it does, hopefully, it will help the flow. It will help the flow. I'm really very interested in what we can get done on the west side of King Ranch Road too. Because if we help the flow, it doesn't help it to get down to a dam and then it backs right on back up. Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything? Because I know it's raining and some people want to go check on their own homes. But do we have anything else? Any other questions? Anybody want to have the last words?
Carl,
Yeah.
the engineer.
Oh, the engineer. There you go.
I just want to say thank you to everyone and, recognize, there it is. Recognize the Madison County Field Office. They are, in office almost 5 days a week. So if you guys do have any questions, do let me know. Keep them involved in the process so they can help you guys out. And also, Mr. Reedus, thank everyone for, for their support.
Good. I got a mic for you, so you gotta say something.
Thank you, sir. Nick Ivey, I'm the Executive Director for the Mississippi Soil and Water Conservation Commission. I just wanted to talk about just a minute about this timeline and just, we explain this to folks all the time. If you build a house, you don't go out there and start nailing boards together and then back up and try to figure out what you're gonna build. You've got to stop and take a little time and look at this holistically, this whole watershed, because these funds that have been brought into Madison County for this project we probably never will see this level of funding in the future. So we have a chance to make a lasting impact on this watershed. We do realize the importance of getting things done as fast as possible, but I can promise you that if you will be patient with us in this planning the part of this, our results will end up being a lot better. So I just wanted to thank OU Lewis, NRCS. The Soil and Water Commission is helping to manage the project with the engineers and that kind of thing, but just rest assured that we are working as fast as we can to get the work done, to get the best answer and the best solution done. So thank y'all for being here tonight. I appreciate it.
I got you. I got a bad reputation, but anyway, I just want to take this opportunity to say on behalf of the mayor of the city of Canton and the Board of Aldermen, also the city of Canton, to thank the Board of Supervisors for partnering with us in this effort to eradicate this flooding. I heard Attorney Esley say earlier, the rain won't go away, and we know that. But if you just have to know, and I know a lot of people have seen this throughout the city, that we have taken a step to do some minimal parts to help eradicate this flooding. That's digging out the ditches in the city of Canton. Hopefully we'll get some more money somewhere down the road and do the significant things, because at this particular point in this particular year, we know this is the most significant step that's been taken concerning the flooding in the city of Canton. Mr. Whitehead mentioned the 1979 flood. I was 15 years old. And you look from that time till now, and we have not seen a significant difference made. But we believe that the good times are on their way, and we're going to be putting our feet to the metal to make sure that we ensure the people who live in the city of Canton to provide that safety element, so when the rain comes, they can rest at night instead of being up all night worrying, will I be underwater the next day. So again, thank you all for your partnership. We'll be working hard, and again, on behalf of the mayor and the Board of Aldermen, we thank you all. We thank you. We thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I'm gonna be shorter than you, Alderman Taylor. I want to thank my board for having the vision to go out and do a study for for Madison County. Because if we hadn't had that study, remember that study cost $500,000, even for Madison County, that is not a little drop in the bucket of money. By having that study done, our attorney, Mike Esty, was able to go and talk to his friend, and we got money set aside before our congressman knew about it. So, but that study started. You got to spend some money to get a lot of money. And hopefully, as we go forward with this project, it's gonna set Canton and the surrounding areas where it look different. When you look different, you have to act different. When you look different, you have better growth. When you look different, you start getting subdivisions, you start getting more business in your area. One thing I'm gonna challenge my alderman of the city of Canton. If you had a young couple that want to come build here within your city limits, working, they might make $100,000, $120,000 a year. Where are you gonna tell them to go build a house? Don't answer. Keep that thought in your mind. Keep that thought in your mind. And I'm finna end up right here and give it back to Carl. Let's move forward, making it where we want to look different. When you look different, things happen good. On our board of supervisors, and I know he don't like to be pointed out, but I'm gonna have to point him out. Our chairman, he stood with us, because there were two of us on that board, Carl and I, that represent Canton. He stood with us and had the same vision that we had. Let's go out and get a study, because we didn't know what we wanted or needed. The only thing we know, we were flooded. So we spent that money. My other colleagues went along with it, but he had the vision with Carl and I to let's do something for Canton, and when we end up, we doing something for the whole county. Thank you.
Appreciate it, election coming up.
Yeah. Tell them about that $1.5 million on King Ranch Road
that we had this year when I lost. Yeah. So it's important that we're able to stay in office long enough to bring projects to fruition. And you all know that. I mean, I'm speaking to the choir here because the people I'm looking at, I've been watching them and they've been coming to the polls voting for Carl Banks for a long time. So keep on doing it, I appreciate it. Now, if anybody else, if not, I think we can adjourn and be ready, listen. We're gonna have other meetings that we're gonna want the community involved, because as we move, this is your project. You know, Madison County is the sponsor, federal government wrote the check, but they wrote the check on your behalf, so it's your project. The aldermen, the supervisors, we gotta listen to you. Next time, bring out some more people that have questions. And if they have questions before the meeting, before we have another meeting set up, you know my number. You can always call me. I chair the wastewater committee, but that committee that we put together is made up of Alderman Well, Taylor, the mayor, Supervisor Griffin, Supervisor Banks, and a few other community people around Madison County. because we are looking at all of Madison County and other areas that also flooded, that hadn't had as much notoriety as Canton's had. But our job right now is to make sure that we stop making the human mistakes and start making decisions that are beneficial long-term. That's going to be in zoning and where we allow development, how we allow development, what the developers must do to ensure that when they put in roads and houses, how they going to stop the runoff. Thank you all for coming.
All right. Thank you.